What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show here on the Spotlight Sports Network, wherever and however you may be watching me here. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is where you can like and follow me on all my social media platforms. Subscribe to the YouTube channel on the Spotlight Sports Network and the Snake Sports Talk Show, and follow me on Spotify for all of my latest podcast episodes. I can't wait to start this show. So I have a few things that I want to end up just kind of talking with everybody. I know it's been a while since I have been posting anything up, but I really do appreciate all of your guys' patience here. I really do appreciate it. And I hope everyone has had a great weekend, and hope you all had a great Mother's Day as well. I know I did for sure. Spending great quality time with my family. We're making great progress ahead, and it's just been kind of. It hasn't been crazy, but it's been really interesting. So, just long story short, I was with my family during Mother's Day, and the second that I end up getting home, the craziest part that happened was I ended up getting into a car accident. But long story short, I'm okay. Everybody else is okay, and we're just moving forward from here. So God bless that nothing else ended up happening, prior to it. I'm very thankful to, still being here and still doing my show. And of course, to be here with all of you this weekend, because I got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to talk about from here. So let me just start out and shift up to this. So I know we've been talking a lot about the NFL, and we've been talking a lot about football for the last couple of weeks. And look, we're going to be having this show here for 2 hours today. 2 hours. It's going to be fun-filled, jam-packed, and I can't wait for it. So let me just start with this. So Pro Football Focus, our good folks there, we all know they're working from home. And we end up getting this list of the top 50 players of the decade. So from 2010 to 2019. Okay, and there are chock-filled of great NFL players all throughout the decade. They all succeeded. They all have won championships, and they were all very impactful players to all their franchises. So, of course, the ranked number one would go to Tom Brady. I mean, let's be honest. He's won multiple Super Bowls, and he's been very impactful for the franchise. Then, of course, comes Drew Brees. Well, that's understandable. He was very clutch, won a Super Bowl in 2011. And, in 2010. And so, all these players throughout this list. So I'm looking at it. Okay. So, you got Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Willis, he's very impactful linebacker. Not that, for sure. Oh, wait a minute. I'm looking down this list, and Russell Wilson is ranked 33rd in Pro Football Focus. How is that? How is Russell Wilson ranked 33rd in Pro Football Focus as best player of the decade? Behind a guard and behind Patrick Willis, who, by the way, Patrick Willis came into the league in 2004. And was very impactful. And then he retired early because of injury concerns and health concerns. And you're telling me that Russell Wilson is right below Patrick Willis? Nothing against Patrick Willis. I think he's a very impactful linebacker. Look, when I watched San Francisco all throughout the games and all throughout the defense was ridiculous. The defense was really good. You know what the problem was? They couldn't make anything happen on the offensive ends. And you have to think about an NFC West division with the Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, and Seahawks. Okay, let me be honest with you. Before Russell Wilson came into the league, Seattle was so irrelevant. They were a team that moments have happened in the franchise that were not so good moments. And they were also known for cool uniforms. Okay? Seattle was not big of a franchise. Well, what about Pete Carroll? And what about him? He was there 2 years prior before drafting Russell Wilson. They were 7-9 in 2010 and 2011. They were relevant. They were not as good of a franchise. And they had but despite having one of the best corners in the league and having one of the most ridiculous, strongest running backs in Marshawn Lynch, and they had some good weapons, but they never could get the quarterback position right. And this is after Matt Hasselbeck was gone, done. So who did they have to invest in? Matt Flynn? A quarterback that they got from the Raiders who really was not all that. They invested in that quarterback, paid him a lot more. And then what did they do in 2012? Well, they drafted a small quarterback at 5'10" named Russell Wilson out of Wisconsin. And everybody doubted him. Everybody doubted him of his size. Everybody doubted him of his skills. Not even sure he's going to be a productive quarterback. They weren't sure of that. And let me just be honest with you. If it hadn't been for Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll would have lost his job. Pete Carroll would have absolutely lost his job. Russell Wilson made things happen the second he went to Seattle. And think about it. He was a guy that was running up for Rookie of the Year. But, RG3 was coming in from a year in Baylor where he was probably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But even he didn't last long. What about some of these other quarterbacks who have been injury prone and have, they've hyped up very, 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 very big time? Because RG3 was a big time hype. And then he got hurt on his legs. Couldn't run anymore. Not as efficient and productive as a quarterback, was he? Jameis Winston, big kid out of Florida State, out of Jimbo Fisher's coaching method. Everybody ran and raved because of the arm, because of the strength, and he's a backup quarterback for Drew Brees because he threw a lot of picks. Not very impactful, was he? Didn't make the playoffs, threw in a lot of picks, and didn't really shape up his game for the best of him. Russell Wilson never got hurt. Russell Wilson never fell short of anything. And he's probably one of the most efficient quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life. In my lifetime. Look, we've had fast, mobile quarterbacks all throughout the years. Randall Cunningham, Michael Vick, and Russell Wilson happened. Then comes Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. All of these mobile quarterbacks. Everybody loves fast-moving quarterbacks nowadays, right? They love the quarterbacks who move out of the pocket, who create spacing for their wide receivers, and throws downfield. We all love that in the NFL now. But who was really the person who got it right? The one who figured it out? Russell Wilson. Yet, we're bashing him on Pro Football Focus. You know what I look at with Pro Football Focus? I think they're a little bit unfocused when they ended up doing their lists. It's absolutely ridiculous. But think about it. What has Russell done since being in the league in 2012? Well, he's been efficient. His quarterback rating was always over 100. Never sold himself short. Won a Super Bowl in 2013. The following year, been to 2 of them. Could have won both of them. But what happened? Media overhyped it a lot. And Russell Wilson never got the credit he deserved. Because think about it this way. Russell Wilson got paid by Seattle. Got paid a big extension. Why? Because he's the face of the franchise. Without Russell Wilson, Seattle continues to be relevant. And Pete Carroll, in his last shot after all the baggage that happened in USC, he would have never got a gig in the NFL again. I'm being honest. Russell had an impact in that. Oh, by the way, what about the Legion of Boom? What about the defense? What about them? They all dispersed because they all threw Russell Wilson under the bus and thinking they're the reason that Seattle became competitive. Really? Here's another thing. This actually, here's a kicker. You're going to love this. Russell's not even the top Seahawk in the franchise. Richard Sherman is. And then below him is Earl Thomas. Where are the two of them? Richard's in San Francisco and Earl Thomas is in Baltimore. Russell is still in Seattle. Why? Pete Carroll trusts him. And he never sells himself short. He's what's interesting about Russell Wilson and why I love him so much as a quarterback, because he's never pressured. Even though the pressure's on him, he doesn't look that way. He doesn't look pressured. He knows what the situation is, and in every time, in clutch moments, he delivers. He delivers, whether it's a win or a loss. Russell Wilson's not shook. But yet we continue to disrespect him, don't we? I don't understand this. I mean, you got to be kidding me. 33rd as the best player of the decade? Come on. Come on. Can we be honest and real? I think Pro Football Focus was so unfocused when they made this list. I mean, think about this. Drew Brees in the decade won 4 playoff. He won 4 playoff games. Russell's won 9. Drew Brees went to a Super Bowl 1 time. Russell's been to 2. It's the same that it goes for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has been to 1 Super Bowl. That's it. Russell's been to 2. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it with this. I just think that this is so disrespectful to a quarterback like Russell Wilson. I don't get it. Let me shift to this. So speaking of quarterbacks and speaking about disrespect, there are a lot of buzzes in the NFL that have been regarding to quarterbacks who have been newly drafted, Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love. Let's begin by Jordan Love for a second. Because, of course, everybody, Green Bay Packer fans, at least the majority, there are good ones. I have colleagues of mine who are Green Bay Packer fans, and they understand this. But everybody is all ranting and raving about Jordan Love. Why'd they pick him? Why'd they trade up to get a quarterback? Because there are lots of reasons involved. By the way, Aaron Rodgers was interviewed about the pick. Why did Green Bay draft Jordan Love? There are multiple reasons why. And Aaron Rodgers was quote unquote surprised they picked a quarterback instead of picking, an offensive lineman, a wide receiver, maybe another running back. He was very surprised at that. But let me just tell you something about Jordan Love. I said this multiple times. Go back to his junior year at Utah State. You know the coach that he had there? The coach was successful. He took every single one of Jordan Love's strengths and used it to make him productive. He was a hell of a quarterback. If he went into the draft his junior year, Jordan Love would have been a higher ranked quarterback. He could have been one of the top 5 best quarterbacks, even though that he already was in this draft, but maybe a little bit higher. But I don't think he would have hit the ceiling like somebody like Joe Burrow or Tua or Justin Herbert. But he would have been up there. But everybody knocks on him because of his senior year at Utah State. Jordan Love is raw talent. Needs a lot of time to work on it. But what coach does he have? Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur last year, 1 year, changed this whole offense up. This was a team that was supposed to be a 9-win team. They went 13-3. It wasn't all because of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers last year was coming off of an 83 quarterback rating, and he threw a lot of balls away because he didn't get with the program. Aaron Jones was productive. Devontae Adams was productive. That defense got much better. But now the defense, 2 impactful linebackers are gone. They got to find a way to fix that. And they go and what do? They draft up a quarterback near the 20s, and they get Jordan Love. Because rumors says that Matt LaFleur is tired of Aaron Rodgers, tired of the judgment calls as a quarterback. Who makes the playbook? Who runs the franchise? That's what Green Bay is sending the message to Aaron Rodgers. Look, we run the franchise, not you. And of course, that's gonna rattle Aaron Rodgers' cage because of the fact of we didn't get a wide receiver, we didn't get anybody. I'm supposed to be here getting all the support. But here's the thing, Aaron. You got offensive coordinators who are making the playbooks, and you've also got the head coach making the plays. You're there to be productive. And that's why Aaron Rodgers, we're not picking on him. This is a little bit of a reality check to Aaron. And because of getting Jordan Love is sending a message to Aaron Rodgers, get with the program. Because look, let's be honest, Aaron Rodgers has been cranky for like late in the season, for late in his career. He's been a little bit cranky. That's okay. But all they're asking is get with the program. Why would the general manager say, you better behave yourself when Matt LaFleur comes in, Aaron? Because he threw a lot of balls away when Mike McCarthy was a head coach, and he's thrown a lot of balls away when Matt LaFleur is a coach. And this all happened in 1 year. Aaron has a tendency where he wears out coaches. Maybe has a tendency of wearing players out because it's my team, it's my plays, I call the shots. Okay, we're going to draft Jordan Love. A reporter came out and said, Jordan Love for Green Bay is going to win more Super Bowls than Aaron Rodgers. Whoa. A reporter came out and said that. Jordan Love is going to win more Super Bowls than Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers has one. Brett Favre had one. It's interesting. And Jordan Love is coachable. That's why Matt LaFleur under this system, he's going to turn out just fine. So let's shift a little bit to Jalen Hurts before we take a break. But Jalen Hurts, by the way, not every Eagle fan, but at least some of the Eagle fan, not the bandwagoners, but the ones who are kind of a little bit biased. The Eagle fans are freaking out because of the fact of why did they get Jalen Hurts in the second round behind Carson Wentz? Let me tell you something. Philadelphia is built for speed. Running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. That's why they got Jalen Hurts. Carson Wentz has tendencies to be hurt. We all know this, right? Who was the one guy who punched the ticket into the playoffs? Carson Wentz. Who was the one guy who had an MVP caliber season? Carson Wentz. Who was the one guy when everybody got hurt, offensive line, defensive players, wide receivers, who, when Dallas healthy, was supposed to be a 13-3 team, they went 8-8. And Philadelphia went 9-7. Who put the team on the shoulders and got into the playoffs? Carson Wentz. But here's the problem. Carson Wentz does have tendencies to be hurt. This is why I look at the Jalen Hurts pick and I said that this is an insurance policy. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I got into a car accident. Okay? I got into a car accident. Bad wreck. Here's what happened. They total the estimate. They give you a rental car and they say, there you go. You got a backup. You got a backup who can also be efficient, who can get you from point A to point B. And you can, and Philadelphia is the type of franchise that is one of the tops in the league and has a smart general manager and Howie Roseman and a great coach who I didn't see being like big when he first came in, but man, he's proving us all wrong. And Doug Peterson with Carson Wentz, they both work. Now you have Jalen Hurts in the middle of this mix. What's to say Jalen Hurts doesn't come into this game if Carson gets hurt again and he's not efficient? By the way, Remember when Philadelphia had Nick Foles and how efficient he was as a quarterback? That's because Doug Peterson worked with him. He worked with him with all of his strengths and all of his struggles and made him an efficient quarterback. What's to say Jalen Hurts is not an insurance policy? Okay, when your vehicle gets wrecked, your star player, Carson Wentz, when he gets injured, you got to have a backup plan. You got to have an insurance policy. If your insurance policy don't cover this, then you're basically going to be set to fail. Because here's the thing. Are you telling me that you're going to rely on a guy like Nate Sudfeld, who I really know not much about? I don't even think he's is an efficient quarterback, a guy that wins games, like a Jacoby Brissett. I don't know if he can win games. But Jalen Hurts has been in two different systems, Alabama and Oklahoma. Both of them are offensive powerhouses. So he understands what an offensive powerhouse looks like. Now Philadelphia's got wide receivers. They got defensive secondaries. They're ready to go. This is a team that I think predicting is going to go 10-6. And I'm going to have my predictions later on, best for last here in the show. But stop freaking out. Stop freaking out about both these draft picks. Both these franchises are going to be fine. Okay, if something were to happen to Carson Wentz, you got maybe one of the best insurance policies in Jalen Hurts. And if something were to happen to Aaron Rodgers, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't go into the program, hell, give Jordan Love 2 years. I guarantee you Green Bay, all their fans, they're going to rant and rave about Jordan Love in the span of 4 weeks. You got to be kidding me with this. What? You got to be kidding me. What is the panic? What is the panic about this? Haven't you ever heard of preparing for the future? Don't you want to be a step ahead of the curve when something happens? Like, give me a break. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm not freaking out about any of these picks. I think these picks were smart. I think this provides a lot of clarity. And I think, honestly, these are probably the best insurance policies you can ask for. Isn't that what we look for when we have car insurance or we have home insurance? We want the best coverage possible with the best affordable insurances. That's why leading insurances like Geico, Progressive, State Farm, all of them provide best insurance policies for the safety for you, the owner, the franchise. I don't get it. I don't get the freak out. Coming up next, so sports is slowly but surely making a comeback, and we're seeing that with NASCAR. I, on the other hand, could potentially I don't have a whole entire plan, but I'm just speaking out as potential possibilities here because MLB, NHL are on a complete pause. MLB now is starting to come out with some ideas, and this is where I'm going to break that down here coming up next. And finally, because this is a 2-hour show and then we're jam-packed today. So we've got a lot of coverages on certain things and certain moves in sports, but I'll have that all here coming up next. Don't go away here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Welcome back, everybody, to the Snake Sports Talk Show. It's going to be a fun-filled weekend. Like I said, I've been so excited for this show and stuff like that. And again, I just don't understand why Pro Football Focus is just disrespecting Russell Wilson yet again. It just makes absolutely no sense. And the same with some of these drafty picks, these quarterbacks, Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts. Like, come on, this is the best insurance policy you can ask for. So since we got NASCAR making a comeback, they'll be racing back up into the raceway tomorrow. Can't wait to see that. It's going to be a little bit challenging. So I know there may be a lot of fans here that are not big-time NASCAR fans, but I'll tell you this. I've been a NASCAR fan since I was 3, and I'm excited for this. I think there are going to be a lot of challenges posing here for NASCAR. And the fact of the matter is, because they've been doing virtual races for 4 races now, and it went by smoothly. It went by really, really smoothly. Lots of drivers, current and even Hall of Fame drivers, they all tried it out. They loved it, and the ratings ended up going up. Because at least we have some type of sport that's still ongoing. And really, NASCAR, you could have both fans or no fans whatsoever. Because the drivers, they're worried about one thing, and that's just driving. And it's like a joyride. You're out there on the weekend, windows down, music blasting in your car, and you're enjoying the joyride. That's what all these NASCAR drivers do. So I'm excited for this. I think the challenge that's going to pose is now that they're in real-time driving, you got to think of the weather. You got to think of the wind speeds. You got to think of everything, and even how the vehicles are functioning. I mean, that's the only hope. You'd hope that all these vehicles are functioning right. I'm sure that they are. From all the best pit crews in in NASCAR. It will be very, very interesting indeed. So I can't wait for that. But while NASCAR is going on, Major League Baseball and NHL, because they're in a constant pause, we have no idea when they're going to be starting back up. And there have been a proposal for Major League Baseball that says they want to start their season up, but they're going to start their season up very, very short. So they have 2 remote locations, Arizona and Florida, that they said they're COVID-free. There's not any kind of activity that's going on, and there are going to be multiple tests. So to me personally, I think this is a double-edged sword for Major League Baseball because we're all used to 162 games a year. Hockey is used to about 84, 86 games a year. Same with the NBA. So they got plenty of times up on their belts, but it's a little shorter than what baseball is. Now, baseball, what's the benefit of 162? Because you have 5 starting pitchers of a rotation. You have a staff. And then you have a lineup that can change over time, depending on how these players produce. And then, of course, if a player gets injured, they got plenty of time to heal themselves back up. And yes, soccer's also back as well. Somebody did mention that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, soccer is back as well. And soccer, I think that's going to be interesting. I don't know how soccer's going to deal with no fans because think about it. Soccer's such a global sport and they rely on fans all over the world. Like every year, I love watching the World Cup. Every year I love watching the World Cup. And it's the most impactful and I think it's the most viewed sporting event, in the nation. Honestly, because lots of things are on the line. You're playing for your country. So that'll be interesting to watch. But for Major League Baseball, look, if you want to talk about games that had no fans, look back at how the Baltimore Orioles dealt with it. Remember when we had the Baltimore riots and they let nobody into the field, nobody into that stadium? It was like an exhibition game. It was like a practice game for the Orioles. It was weird. But they managed to pull it off. They were saddened with the fact that they had no fans in the stands, and it was the most awkward moment in sports. But it was understandable. There were riots. They wanted no violence in any of the stadiums. That's okay. But you know who was peeping in on the gates? The diehard Baltimore Oriole fans. The diehards who just wanted to watch baseball. Here's what's going to be hard about trying to get the season back up, even with COVID still going on. We're in phase 1, and we're trying to get into phase 2 as best as possible. But here's what's going to be interesting. So 2 remote locations, Arizona and Florida. How are you going to convince these players to be playing into both these stadiums? We know they want to get going because a lot of them are sitting at home. Most of them probably don't have in-home workouts, but they're trying to make the best of it. And they're spending quality time with their families, their friends, their loved ones, etc. So you're telling me that all these players, they got to play in a remote area for, from what I've being heard, there's about between 80 to 70 games for this whole season. You're going to tell me that they're going to end up playing at 80 games, maybe a little bit more in remote areas, and they don't get to see their families? They don't get to see their friends? Any of that? Or what happens, when they get injured? How are they going to deal with that? There's going to be multiple tests every single day. So Blake Snell came out and said that it's a risk because of the fact of COVID goes around and they're taking a pay cut. I thought this was interesting of Blake Snell to say. But here's what's interesting. This is now where this is starting to leak out. Players starting to play, not for the love of the game. Players playing because their monies and contracts are involved. And look, everybody's trying to get compensated and everybody's trying to be secured financially throughout this whole COVID crisis. We've had multiple people speaking out about that in politics. And look, I don't watch politics on a daily basis because I just think that it's too much filibustering and my brain can't really ingest in that. So it's good. I just think it's going to be interesting. But I'm not sure how they're going to pull this off, because even though the baseball is 162 games a year and nobody watches the whole season, only time people watch baseball is when we're in postseason. It's the same when it goes for hockey. Not a lot of people watch hockey unless you have primetime games, classic games, and you're in the Stanley Cup playoffs. NBA is very different because there's a lot of realities. It's a star-driven league. And everybody tunes into the NBA playoffs. Trust me, the ratings go up when we go to the NBA playoffs. Adam Silver, as a commissioner, has done everything spot on. He's had the right words to say. He's had the plan from the get-go because he's protective of his players. He's protective of the organization and the NBA as a whole, and he's protective of all the staff members of every franchise and every organization. And he works well with great owners, Joe Lacob, Mark Cuban, so many different owners of every franchise in the NBA, and has been trying to find ways to make it work. There have been a lot of proposals, and I've heard this from my colleagues as well on the Spotlight Sports Network, talking about why not making a March Madness deal, a one-and-done deal. I think it's interesting, but we're not sure. I mean, there are a lot of franchises in the NBA. We're not sure how that might work, but, I just think there are a lot of challenges involved, and we know financials is going to be in the middle of the mix because you have player contracts, you have players, of course, who are either still on the injury list or they're coming off the injury list, how they're going to work this out. Because, look, we got minor leagues now that aren't even playing. I haven't heard, the stadium out here in Vegas and Summerlin has been sounding like crickets. We haven't had any activity in minor league baseball, but even in minor league hockey, there's not going to be a hockey season for the AHL. They canceled all of that. And so this is going to be a huge financial hit. But at the same time, if two parties are not on the same program, how are we going to get sports back? NASCAR doesn't really need fans. NASCAR doesn't really need fans. Soccer is going to be interesting because in soccer, because it's such a global sport, everybody watches it. Everybody watches it by the time that we're in the World Cup. And it's going to be interesting. And so one just said, I'm going to point this out. If NBA does come back, they should have the teams in group stages like they do in FIFA. That's actually not bad. I mean, I think that's fair. They've been talking about Vegas being a remote area as well because of the summer leagues and so on and so forth. we'll see how this plays out. I mean, the NBA has done a very good job of player safety and, of course, for the safety of the organizations around the league. And so it'll be an interesting process. But we know there's going to be lots of tests involved. We know that there's going to be a lot of medical personnel because it's for the safety. It's for the safety of everybody. But, fans, they're behind the idea of we don't have to necessarily be there. We just want to watch something that's recent. Like, think about it this way. When you watch a television show or you watch a mini-series and the mini-series is over, what do? You find something new. And there's nothing new. There's reruns. So that's why if we get sports kicked back on, and even if the fans don't even have to be there, that's fine. But at least there's new content. There's news. There's something new happening. That's what the fans are all about. But I think that this will be an interesting proposal, but I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that all financially. Time now for the hot press. So as we talked about with Major League Baseball, they ended up discussing about a safety proposal that includes thorough testing, social distancing, and no spitting, which, when you see guys that, that chew or they eat sunflower seeds, of course they spit, but there are responsible ones that, they carry water bottles and they're very responsible with it. So they said they plan processing upwards of 10,000 coronavirus tests per week, and overhauling stadiums and in-game settings to encourage social distancing and rigorous rules intended to prevent against the spread of COVID-19. This is interesting. Now, as I've said, there are going to be multiple tests. There's going to be multiple tests involved. Now, of course, for a lot of these players, because we're not sure, there are players who, have chewing tobacco. There are players, of course, who chew sunflower seeds. Some of them are responsible. Some of them we're not sure, but we're not holding that against them. And there are some that, that are old school and they chew gum. So I think this will be interesting, but it's a lot of tests involved all throughout the week. But again, this is where they have to work through that in a remote area. How are they going to get organizations involved? So, we'll see in the coming weeks. It'll be interesting. So, Giants cornerback DeAndre Baker had announced that he turned himself in to Broward County Jail on Saturday for 4 counts of armed robbery with a firearm and 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, and also Dunbar undecided so far of his fate, of what his involvement was with Baker. So, look. Of course, stuff like this now leaking out in the, in media, and it's like, look, we're going through a COVID, and there are some people who are very respectful and they're doing exactly their jobs. Which, by the way, for all of my fans, I really do appreciate all of you guys staying safe, staying healthy, and being responsible throughout this time. But I just can't believe it. It's crazy. But again. Truths are going to come out eventually. They're going to find some more and more evidences, but I can't really speak too much upon it because this is only just the sources that we're getting. So Baker turns himself in. I like the idea because of the fact of if someone's at fault, then, own up to it. And that's all I ask for. It doesn't make you anything less of a person, but we'll see exactly what happens in the coming days. It'll be very, very interesting. And then finally, former Alabama quarterback and Tua's brother, Taulia Tagovailoa, ends up transferring over to Maryland. So as they hit the transfer portal on May 8th, he found his new home in Maryland. So he's going to be now a part of the Terps. This is interesting because Tua, of course, who's now a Miami Dolphin, and his brother Taulia, he's, from what I've heard, he's a real good kid. He's also another one that, not so much a big time, not so much of a big time impactful player, but I think he's interesting. I mean, amongst his brother Tua, who's now in the NFL, I think there are some real good perspectives and some real good potentials for his younger brother. And this is what they've said from Mike Locksley, who's the Maryland coach, says he has an outstanding field vision and excellent pocket awareness. He's a twitchy passer that has the ability to make and extend plays in and outside of the pocket because of his above average athleticism, has terrific touch and trajectory on his throws, and delivers the ball with above average accuracy. He's a highly competitive player that will bring great competition to a good quarterback room. I think that'd be interesting. And Maryland, not big of a program that a lot of people are used to seeing, but Maryland's they produce some really, really good young talents. I mean, they produced up some real good defensive players, some offensive players who we really have never thought, like, they're under radar guys that we never usually see. But I think this would be great. I think this would be really, really good for a guy like Taulia, and maybe there's some new things into this program. So, but it turns out, Coach Locksley from Maryland, I think he's excited for this. And I think the potentials are great. I think the potentials are great for him, and I'm sure that they're going to work through him all throughout the way. So there was your hot press. So coming up here, before we end up hitting into the break and we get ready for hour 2, I just wanted to kind of break down a little bit of something with The Last Dance, because all of us, my God, I love this documentary. This documentary has brought out so many different stories and so much clarity that, like, I love it. Absolutely love it. Any of us who has never really known so much looking in about Michael Jordan and the type of player that he was, and even the person that he was carrying himself both on and off the court, there are a lot of different things that are coming out, and our perspectives are changing. I'm going to touch upon that a little later on, coming up here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. By the way, if you all are just tuning in here to the Snake Sports Talk Show, I would encourage all of you guys to subscribe to the Snake Sports Talk Show and the Spotlight Sports Network YouTube channels. Hit the bell button for all the notifications of all the up and coming shows and all the videos that we have posted from myself and, of course, all of our great colleagues here in the network. I'm really, really glad to be a part of this network. It's a great network full of really, really good, talented young minds. Man, it's so much fun. And I watch every single video, whether it's not just my show, but even the videos of our great colleagues here in the network. And I'm just so happy and blessed to be a part of this network. So getting past that. So tomorrow you've got episode 9 and episode 10 of The Last Dance. What have we learned so far about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls? We learned an awful lot. And there have been lots of pushbacks. There have been lots of respects and understandings. And listen, I had watched Michael Jordan, and watching the NBA and watching just greatness before our very eyes. And what's so interesting about this Last Dance documentary, amongst all documentaries, because honestly, ESPN, when they come out with these documentaries, they're so good. It's like every television show and even movie that you watch, and they catch your attention so fast, and they reel you in. They let you in on a little like inside story of certain, certain movies, certain episodes, and even on, just biographies. I mean, I love this. So what we've learned about The Last Dance, and we'll have coverage of this also tomorrow with our great colleagues on the Spotlight Sports Network. But one thing I will say about Michael is, again, Michael grew up with absolutely no respects. He grew up where it was hardened and where he had to work much harder to get to where he is. And he wasn't like expecting anything from anybody. He was working his game, working to getting better. And because think about it, he was not the number one overall pick. Never really got drafted out of high school. He got drafted out of North Carolina in college. And he didn't have any respect from a lot of people. He never got respect from his dad, no respect from his brother. The only person who respected him was his mom. And then when he came into the league, not a whole lot of respect from certain people and businesses. But that didn't matter to Michael. Michael was so closed in. He was very private with his life, which understandable for a lot of athletes even today. If you are putting in your boundaries, you're putting up a wall, you're not doing that to be disrespectful. You're doing that to being, listen, understand, I have a personal life. I have a private life, and I want to keep it that way. I'll let you in on little spits and spurts about myself, but I won't let you in all the way. And this documentary has been so successful with letting us in on what has gone on in Michael's life, but at the same time has led us into what we look at when we look at sports today. The Chicago Bulls, if none of the rumors came out, or none of these other, different calls or different, different ideas or anything like that came out, and they would have just stayed together, the Bulls would have won more championships. They would have won more championships. They still had juice. They still had a lot of juice to get through things. And they weren't even close to getting out of their prime yet. They were still in their prime. Yes, of course, they had to think of the future, but it was so fast how it happened. But if you think about the NBA in regards to what it looks like today, the NBA back then was not so hardened. It was not so hardened than people think it is today. It's not. The NBA back then was all physicality. All physicality. You had to fight for buckets. You had to grind through, whether you were suffering through injuries, just to get your team the lead. And not a lot of people understand that. Not a lot of people have actually gone through that stage, especially in that era. I guarantee you, if you put LeBron in the era of Michael Jordan to Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Hakeem, I guarantee you LeBron would have much, much difficult circumstances that he has to overcome. That's the way that the NBA was. When you watch the Chicago Bulls against the Detroit Pistons facing off against the Bad Boys, they threw fists, they threw elbows. They pushed you around because they wanted to get inside your head. They wanted you to lose your composure to where you slipped and you made mistakes. And Michael was very hardened because in that era, it's what shaped him to be the player and even being the person that he is today. And so when I look at Michael, very down-to-earth person. Yes, he had a lot of trash talks, but that's what fueled him through the game. He wasn't being disrespectful to nobody. Some people didn't really get it. Some people didn't really understand what Michael's MO was both on and off the court. Nobody understood that. But when we watch this documentary of The Last Dance, now a lot of understanding is out. We now have a lot more respect for Michael Jordan. And look, this is not to take anything away from LeBron. Okay, none of it. LeBron came in when he was a high school kid, much like Kobe. Kobe came in high school. But Kobe shows more of that drive and determination that Michael Jordan had, which is given the name the Black Mamba, the Mamba mentality. LeBron, he was the chosen one. He was the king. But I guarantee you that if you put LeBron in that same era of basketball as Michael Jordan, I think a lot of things would have changed. A lot of things would change. And it's not just about championships. Not about championships, not about division titles or scoring titles. It's about how you build yourself as a player. It's about how you carry yourself, both on and off the court. Michael displayed that. He displayed that. He was a prime example, leads by example, of what the NBA was. And honestly, because think about it, before Steph Curry came in, everybody worked hard to get points, to get baskets. Not anymore. You got him now shooting for threes, and threes were not big back then. So now I think we have a lot of respects for Michael, and I can't wait till episode 9 and 10 come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hour 2 coming up next. Stay tuned. Snake Sports Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for hour 2. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening today. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is where you can like and follow me. Also, subscribe to the Spotlight Sports Network and the Snake Sports Talk Show on the YouTube channel just by hitting subscribe and the bell for all the notifications on the show. And also follow me on my Spotify my Spotify account as well. I have all of my my podcast episodes out as well. I know I haven't been doing a podcast in a long time. But I'm definitely going to be changing that up. I'm going to be getting ready to get episode 16 on. So what I'm going to be doing, which is different, because I do a lot of my live stream shows here on the Spotlight Sports Network and also on the Snake Sports Talk Show as well. So I've been trying to get a niche. I've been trying to get a balance between trying to do a podcast, trying to do a live stream. So what I will be doing on podcasts is I'll do something that's like an after show podcast. I'll be breaking down everything that I've discussed here on the live stream. I think this will be fun. Now, I will in fact have more interviews in the coming days. I just know that with everything that's been possibly going on from the COVID, everything that's been happening personally, been working hard trying to get, that motivation, a little bit of that drive, because it's been crazy. But I'm here. I'm glad to be here with all of you guys this whole weekend. I hope you guys are having a great weekend, staying safe, staying healthy, and staying responsible throughout these trying times. The good thing is I got my morning coffee, so, I got something to keep me up. So let me shift to this today. So the NFL comes out with all the schedules, and I think each and every single one of them are so unique. And I'll be discussing about that as a best for last here on this show. And, because I just truly think that there are a lot of teams in both the AFC and the NFC that some of them are getting breaks, some of them not so much, and there are a lot of challenges. And then you've got the teams that are rebuilding. Outside of Detroit and Jacksonville, there's no excuses for any of these teams. All these teams, you're either getting some breaks or you're not. And these are challenging games. I think each and every one of them, all these games are on the line for every organization, except for Detroit, except for Jacksonville. I cannot doubt New England as of right now, because New England, they've had a dynasty. They're taking a year off, and then they may end up revamping and re-energizing themselves for the next year. I don't know. I don't know what plans are in the cards for Bill Belichick. But there are a bunch of matchups that I look at here. So Cincinnati, I don't think is going to have any breaks. And this is where you have the future of the franchise, Joe Burrow, behind center for this franchise. And they picked up a lot of good players. I'm not sure how their offensive line is going to produce, because the offensive line last year was ranked last. They had a lot of injuries, and then there were a lot of young offensive linemen that, we're not even sure of if they're very productive and if they could protect a guy like Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow's got a lot to work on, because here's the thing. You're no longer in LSU, an offensive line that gave you so much time in the pocket, whether you were running, whether you were pocket passing in his presence. He had plenty of time in the pocket when he was in LSU. If you had seen every single one of the games Joe Burrow has played, he's had plenty of time in the pocket. He's had not even one sure sign of being pressured. Not one. Whether they were playing Clemson, whether they would play Ohio State, whether they would play Alabama. No sign of that whatsoever. And I know a lot of people have perspectives of him. Joe Burrow had the greatest college, football season of his life. Okay. You also have to remember too, he was a transfer student from Ohio State, goes to LSU. I am a firm believer of adjustments, but this is where you're in the NFL. The game is like this: speedy, fast. Joe Burrow, you're not going to have an awful lot of time to react. That's where you have to speed your game up. And that's where I look at it because of all these prospects in the NFL coming in. I mean, Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, a lot of them, they all have potentials. They all have qualities that I think could work in these franchises. But there are a lot of teams out here in the NFL that I think are going to be interesting. One of them pointed the Cardinals. The Cardinals, I think, are going to be interesting. Now, in an NFC West where San Francisco, not sure how they're going to play out, but they did at least upgrade a little bit more on defense. Because Robert Saleh is a hell of a defensive coordinator, and he knows exactly how to work this defense. They lose to DeForest Buckner, but they go and get Javon Kinlaw. They go and get another defensive presence in that defensive line, and then the secondaries are strengthened up. So this is going to be interesting to watch San Francisco. The Rams, I think, might take a slight step back. I don't see them being very impactful. The problem with them is because they got a salary cap they have to deal with. They lost a couple of real good players, Dante Fowler, Brandon Cooks, but Brandon Cooks has been injury prone, and they lose Todd Gurley. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Rams play out. And finally, the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. And as I've already discussed again, Russell, for whatever reason, is just being disrespected by so many different analysts. It's ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about a guy since 2012 who's been very impactful to the organization, who's turned this franchise around where now they're a top 5 best franchise in the NFL. Well ran. I don't get it. But the Cardinals are going to have a lot of obstacles to overcome. I love Kyler Murray. Don't get me wrong. I love Kyler Murray. But that offensive line, they need to get healthy. Despite having Josh Rosen before Kyler Murray arrived, they didn't have a strong offensive line. Whether Kyler Murray knows how to run out of a pocket and create space, you still need to protect your franchise quarterback. You still need to protect him. So the Cardinals are going to have a lot of obstacles. Bengals are going to have some obstacles. The AFC East, I think the Bills and the Jets, they're primed for something special. Sam Darnold finally will no longer have to run for his life anymore after they go and get Mekhi Becton. And the Bills, they got a number 1 wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, who I think can be productive on this team. And the AFC West is the greatest division in football currently, with Kansas City, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders. All of them possess defense. They possess offense. Some of them, head coaches we're not sure of. But Andy Reid, John Gruden, Vic Fangio, and Anthony Lynn, they could all stand out as really good coaches in that division. But it depends on how all of this shapes up. But this is no excuses for either teams. No excuses for Cleveland either. With Baker Mayfield having a strong offensive line in front of him, he better produce. Cleveland's got so many offensive weapons. Austin Hooper, Nick Chubb, David Njoku, OBJ, Jarvis Landry. You better produce. And Kevin Stefanski, and what I like about this is the fact that he's a grown-up, but at the same time, he brings in a guy like Case Keenum, who he knows in Minnesota, that can push a guy like Baker Mayfield. Because one screw-up, they're done. Cleveland's done. They're going to look at it as him as a bust in Cleveland. And then Case Keenum's going to come around, and he's going to find a way to be productive. But that's where Baker's got to shape himself. This is no knock on Baker. I believe Baker Mayfield can be a better quarterback, but he's got to be willing to put the work in. No more commercials, no more distractions, no more excuses. You have a grown-up in the room now. So there's no giving away all this power. So, that's just how I see it right now currently with the NFL. And I think it's going to be interesting. I like the schedules, how they're set. And I think the NFL is going to be very, very exciting. Let me shift to this. So the NBA, because we talked about The Last Dance, and we talked about so much more. I said this in my previous show, and here's what I think is interesting. So Golden State had a proposal they were going to make, and it had nothing to do with this is all before COVID and so much more. So Golden State was taking a step back this year because after losing Kevin Durant, after losing Klay Thompson to injury, Steph Curry to injury, Golden State was taking a step back. Which, okay, that's fine. You know, it's no issue. But Golden State had a proposal because what do they got? They ended up getting Andrew Wiggins and a bunch of draft picks after giving away D'Angelo Russell to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we know through this pandemic, you're going to get Klay, you're going to get Steph back, both of them healthy, and Draymond Green's going to be 110%. But here was the proposal Golden State wanted to do. And I spoke this out in the previous shows. I said, watch out for Golden State because they have a lot of draft capital. They've got a lot of money revenue because of the new collective bargaining agreement. And they've got some potential players they're going to have to move. Before COVID happened, this was the proposal. They've got a lottery draft pick that could easily become a number 1 draft pick in next year's NBA. And so if they ended up getting that, and they have Andrew Wiggins in place, who we know is a kid that's going to make a lot of money, and he's going to be a very, very productive player, what's to say Golden State doesn't give a phone call to Milwaukee inquiring about Giannis Antetokounmpo, getting the Greek Freak? Joe Lacob and Bob Myers are very, very smart people in that front office. I mean, you're talking about Silicon Valley. You're talking about a team that has had a dynasty. They've won championships, and they've had no issues. There is no issues to whether or not that the team might break up or anything like that. They've had no issues. Look, because we always give the spotlight to a guy like Draymond Green all the time. But that's not the case. This franchise is ran between Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the Splash Bros. It's always been like that. But Golden State had a proposal in plan before COVID-19 happened. And we know with the effects of COVID, it's going to end up affecting a little bit financially. And so this is now where the decision is made for Giannis, whether or not he's going to leave or he's going to stay in Milwaukee. Because I made this point. If Milwaukee doesn't win the Eastern Conference championship, Giannis is gone. You lose Malcolm Brogdon, who I thought was a very important number 3 player that elevates the team both offensively and defensively as a little supporter. Chris Middleton, good kid, but I don't see him as a very impactful number 2. And that's where Giannis, I pointed this out, Milwaukee's franchise was saved, luckily, by Giannis. If Giannis had not come to Milwaukee, that organization could have relocated. And there have been lots of talks about potential relocations or maybe potential expansions going to various cities. Vegas is on the map. And that's where I think that could have been the relocated city for Milwaukee. But because Giannis happened, that proposal was burnt out. So Golden State's smart. Golden State is smart with how they deliver in their proposals. Because again, Bob Myers is a smart general manager. It's the reason Kevin Durant, they ended up pursuing him and they got him into Golden State. Despite the differences between Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and all this other stuff. And then Durant goes to Brooklyn. Despite all that, Bob Myers knows exactly how to make the proposal, and players want to come in and play with guys like Steph and Klay. A little bit of Draymond. Now you got Eric Paschall. Well, I think he's going to be a really, really good player for the near future. But I guarantee you, and I'm not sure how this is going to handle financially, but if Golden State makes a proposal where they go and get Giannis, now this is all going to depend on Giannis. If he takes that deal, you're talking about a franchise now that has another dynasty for another 5-7 years. It's incredible. This is why nobody loves Golden State. Because think about it. Look at all the Fortune 500 companies who are in America today. Amazon, Apple, Google, Tesla. All these guys have proposals in mind, and they know how to shape shift. They know how to shift around so many places just to keep the company stable, because they're winning franchises. They're smart winning franchises. Golden State, smart winning franchise. Clippers, they're working to be a smart winning franchise. Lakers have for years have been a smart winning franchise. But this is going to be interesting. This is going to be very, very interesting. But they said because of, the COVID-19 hit and hitting financials, it's going to be a much bigger challenge than what everybody else thinks it is. But I'm just saying, don't brush this off. Don't brush this off. If you don't think Golden State could pull that off, again, it could go one way or another. I'm not here rooting for Golden State, but I'm just saying, if you look at the smartest people in America today and how they got themselves to where they are, it's a lot of shifts. It's a lot of shifts. Coming up, I will be discussing a little bit more on, I'm actually going to be talking a little bit more up on the NHL, because we haven't really heard a whole lot from Commissioner Bettman, but there is going to be a little bit of some proposals in mind. And also my best for last, I will then be talking about the NFL and my predictions of the season moving forward. And I'll be starting with the AFC. That's all coming up next here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. If you're just tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in here onto the show. So happy to be here with all of you guys this weekend. Oh, man. I'll tell you, I'm very excited for The Last Dance coming up tomorrow, episodes 9 and 10. Can't wait for them. But as I've said, there's a lot of things that we could look into, but this whole documentary has been great. I really have been impressed with it. I think it's really kind of shown a lot more of how we really just like approach this era's NBA and what we could look forward to in the next couple of years. And one of my biggest things is because I think not a lot of people have seen so much of what Michael Jordan is capable of. And I mean, to me, I've seen this before. Michael Jordan has been very, very impactful in every single way possible. And now it's becoming understanding to all of age groups like myself at 25 or younger, because we really never seen so much of that. So, I really do think it's interesting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the NHL. Right now, they're in a big pause, and there is a proposal that's out where they're trying to get multiple testers out there in most of these arenas. Now, here's what's going to be the difficult part, because we talked about baseball. My big thing with the NHL, because the NHL is so enclosed, you got glass all around the ice rink. So it's all in just this area. You don't have to worry about certain fans or certain people on the outsides, but you do have to worry about the players on the insides. That's all the players on the team, the coach, the staff, the medical personnel. You have to worry about all those people. So, and I haven't really heard much from Commissioner Gary Bettman and what seems to be the proposal in place. So there are a lot of different perspectives that could happen here for the NHL. But it's not to say it's not possible. The only hard part that I could tell you about the NHL, because it's an organization unlike the NFL, unlike NBA and MLB, because each of them, they all have their different money budgets. In NHL, there's not really a whole lot. I mean, the NHL has gone on strike before, and it was not pretty. Not really, really pretty. Usually every year in the NHL, they want a Stanley Cup champion. That's the MO. But the only big thing that I can tell you in hockey, what has to come together, because this whole proposal has to come out to two nations, the U.S. and Canada. Because right now you could tell from some of these people who live in Canada, live in all the different countries out there, like they've got to find a way to make it happen to where there's a remote area where it's cold, it's right temperature. Because think about it. If you try to play the Stanley Cup playoffs here in Vegas, it's difficult because we're in 110-degree weather. It's hot. So there's a lot of heat that's building up into the arena, and that could also take a toll on the ice. So my biggest thing is because the other thing is the visas. Trying to get players from Canada or even from US to go back and forth, vice versa. And there's a lot of tests that has to be involved. I'm sure that I'm not sure, of course, with the quarantining standards, but there's a lot of that in place. And again, financials as well, that's taking a toll, especially in this organization, because it's really, really money tight. Because you have to think of some of these organizations, how they're handling throughout COVID-19. It's not easy for hockey. It can be a little easier. It's been easier for the NFL because they're done with their season. They've had their draft, they had their free agency, and they all did it straight out from home. And then you also have the NBA, which was in a pause, but Adam Silver's been able to, come out with proposals trying to be safe for the players, safe for the medical staffs and everybody in the organization, and making it for the better for them to get the season back up and running. Baseball is going to be a little bit different because there are not a whole lot of salary caps, but there are luxury tax thresholds. And trying to get a season started very short could be very risky. Now in NHL, and here's also a good question, could they finish the season in Russia? again, that's going to depend on passports and visas. And look, it is a process getting a passport, getting a visa, because you're traveling outside the country. And again, I don't know how the regulations with each country involved, how strict they are, because I'm sure with all the COVID, I mean, in the European countries, they have a lot of places shut down. They're not resuming anything yet. We know Korean baseball has gotten back up and running. There's no fans there, but they have certain strict regulations. So I'm not sure how Russia might. I mean, it is a good idea, because Russia, I mean, you're dealing with all the cold, but you have to think about some of these things in place: the visas, the passports, how to get these players there, because you can't expect to have a proposal, ship a lot of organizations out there, and then they have to go into a quarantining state where they have to stay a certain amount of days, and now all these players are away from their families. That is where I think is just as tricky. So, I mean, again, these are a lot of challenges that are coming out of COVID. And it's not just financially, but you have to think of the morale and the mindset from all these players and all these franchises. Yes, we want sports back. And it doesn't matter if you got fans in the stands or not. You can make either one of them happen. You could just pretend, hey, we don't have to have fans in the stands. UFC's done it. NASCAR's currently doing it. Soccer's doing it. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not the guy who has the answers for everything, but if I'm looking at it, thinking outside the box from the inside outs, there's visas, there's passports, there's a lot of things that could potentially happen. So, I mean, it will be interesting. It will be interesting for sure, but I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. It's going to be very challenging, but it's not to say they can't find a different alternative way. But again, it's been a long pause. We're not sure how the season's going to kick back up, but I do think that if it should, I think it should go right into the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, end of story. Start the Stanley Cup playoffs, because there has to be a Stanley Cup champion in place. That's just the way that hockey is. They got to have a Stanley Cup champion. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But it will be interesting for sure. But we're not sure exactly how that's going to carry out. That's why there's a lot of proposals in place, but I'm open to all ideas. I don't have an answer for all of them, but I'm open to all ideas, and maybe somebody's got a different opinion than I do. Time again for the hot press. So more news on the NFL as Redskins wide receiver Cody Latimer has been arrested for assault, illegal discharge of a firearm that happened early Saturday morning in Douglas County, Colorado, inside his apartment. So, of course, you know, a lot of things are just kind of coming out from here. He had been booked on felony charges of assault in the second degree, menacing and illegal discharge of a firearm, and misdemeanor charges of prohibited use of a weapon and reckless endangerment. This is what the Redskins office had to say. We are aware of the situation and have informed the NFL league offices. We will continue to gather more information and have no further comment at this time. So, you know, again, I mean, we've had the situation between, you know, Baker and Dunbar. Not, you know, again, I know this COVID thing, there are a lot of things that are kind of happening and coming out, but, you know, in the same time, dude, you know, be responsible. What are some things that's got to happen? You know, what exactly needs to happen? That's just my opinion. I mean, there's a lot of crazy things that are kind of coming out, but you know, it's going to be interesting. So Saturday night's fights, we got the UFC fight night heavyweight main event between Walt Harris and Alistair Overeem. Why Walt, I think, returning to the octagon after the tragic loss of his stepdaughter. Now, this is going to be interesting. So I think this is going to be a great fight. Alistair Overeem, I always loved watching him fight. Regardless of everything that's gone around in his personal life, I think this is going to be a great fight. And the UFC so far has done a great job with no fans, testings all throughout, you know, the coming weeks before fight nights. And and then carried on. I know a lot of people have been bashing the UFC left and right. Even their own television companies have been bashing Dana White all throughout this. But I think this is going to be a great fight. Walt Harris, we know, with the loss of his stepdaughter, it's going to be something that's going to motivate him and push him. And I think we're going to have a real good fight night. Something that I think kind of gets our mind out of the clear. Maybe something I would end up watching for sure. But we do have some UFC fights as well. So of course, too, in the NBA, here's what's interesting. So the NBA stars owners are letting Silver lead the league's revival. So Woj came out with an article about why a lot of billionaires and a lot of personnels are listening more to Adam Silver throughout this league's revival. So we've seen what Adam Silver's done. He's been very, very smart with protecting his players, the franchises in the league, and how this league's going to be ran. They've and he's also been in the White House conferencing building with President Trump and trying to figure out ways of getting sports back up and running and trying to get the economy back again. So Adam Silver's done exactly and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but he's done everything that he felt was the right way of trying to approach getting the season back up and running, and how that the optimism in the NBA is growing to getting a seasonal restart. But we're not sure how that's going to propose. I still do think that the NBA, they got to go into playoffs. I mean, this is the time of year where the NBA playoffs are currently going on. And again, colleagues of mine have been stating about, a March Madness type deal. But I mean, Adam Silver, Roger Goodell have been the only two general managers or commissioners in the leagues for the NFL and the NBA who have led the way. And it's funny. Adam Silver is David Stern 2.0. I would agree. But that's the thing. Adam Silver's been very, very focused in the situation and how he's trying to protect his players in the league. Roger Goodell's done such a great job with holding up the draft, holding up the free agency, because it's everything that can happen over the phone or through a fax machine and all this other stuff. So these leagues have been doing such a great job with that. So I'd like to see how the NBA is going to approach it, but it's going to be a lot of challenges in place. So there again is your hot press. So coming up here as my best for last, I'm going to end up giving an AFC prediction of divisions, playoffs, how I think that the season's going to turn out after the schedule has been released. I'm going to explain that more coming up next on Best for Last. So you don't want to end up missing that here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. All right, so I really am happy that you guys have tuned in here throughout this whole 2 hour show. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really, really happy to be spending the Saturday with all of you guys. Man, I've just been jam packed with so much stuff, but I want to leave you guys this here on my best for last. So I got my AFC predictions for the whole entire schedule because, again, I think the schedule now is all there's no excuses this year. There's no excuses here for all the NFL teams. And I think this is going to be very, very exciting. So I can't wait for this because I think that there are going to be a lot of surprises. And I think there are going to be lots and lots of, different terms here for each of these teams. I think this will be fun. I think this year is going to be fun for the NFL. So I can't wait for the season to start up. So here we go. My best for last here, AFC edition. Here we go. So let's start with the AFC North. That's the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Steelers. So I do, however, see the Baltimore Ravens winning the division at 12-4. Behind them will be the Cleveland Browns. And then I think personally, I think the Bengals and the Steelers are going to end up going 7-9. So look, we know the Ravens, I think it's going to be hard to really win 13 games or win more than that like they did a season ago. Lamar Jackson and the whole entire offensive front line, they were a run-first offense. I thought that was very, very interesting and seeing exactly how this team was going to produce. But they made it happen. They made it happen all throughout it. So I think the Ravens will do it again. The Browns, I think, are finally going to get at least a chance to be a much better team. And going 9-7, I think is fair because let's be honest. I thought Cleveland was going to end up going 10-6. I thought they were going to go 10-6 last year with all the offensive powerhouses, but that didn't happen. You had Freddie Kitchens. It was too much pressure for him, and they couldn't get it right. So, and I think for the redeveloping teams like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, because Cincinnati, we know there's going to be a lot of pressures on Joe Burrow, and they're trying to see exactly how he handles against pressure. This is a new face of the franchise. And Pittsburgh right now, because they don't have big time legitimate weapons, but that might change because after getting Eric Ebron, Big Ben, we'll see exactly how he plays out. But I just don't think Big Ben is really motivated as being the type of quarterback he once was, even with all these injuries. So I think it's fair to putting Pittsburgh at 7-9, but they could change 8-8. And there hasn't been a losing season for Mike Tomlin since his time of coaching. So that could change in the coming weeks. So, but that's how I have it. Baltimore 12-4, Cleveland 9-7, and both Pittsburgh and Cincinnati finishing up at 7-9. Okay, so we're moving into the AFC South. So this is the Colts, the Titans, the Jags, and the Texans. So I have the Colts winning the division at 11-5. Listen, the Colts have done a lot of things right. The offensive line is much stronger, and despite with Andrew Luck a season ago retiring and giving the reins to Jacoby Brissett, they went and got themselves a veteran quarterback in Phillip Rivers for 1 year. Now, we're not sure how the production levels are going to be because he's coming off of a year, lots of picks, lots of mistakes, and he has no athleticism. But he has an offensive line finally that will protect him to give him enough time in the pocket to throw. And they've got healthy wide receivers in T.Y. Hilton and a new rookie, Michael Pittman Jr., who I thought was a steal of the draft. I think the Colts are going to be much improved, and I do see them going 11-5 and winning the division. Behind them, you got the Tennessee Titans at 9-7, because here's the thing. Tannehill has a new contract. Derrick Henry is now on a franchise tag contract, and we're not sure how Tennessee is going to produce. They were a somewhat of a great story they were a great story going into the championship game. But, and Mike Vrabel's been a really, really good coach, and I think he handles the league very, very well. But I do see Tennessee finishing up at 9-7 again, and I think this could potentially be a playoff team. I don't doubt Mike Vrabel one bit. And I think there are going to be some challenges imposed because of the fact of Tannehill's new contract. Can he produce, even having a contract extension with this team? And then, of course, the two rebuilding franchises, Houston and Jacksonville. I think this is going to be interesting. Because I think Jacksonville right now, they've gotten rid of a lot of their players. I don't really see them kind of being the big impact of the organization. And then you got Houston in the middle of the mix. So Houston right now, because they have a lot of injury prone offensive players, that's just going to hurt Deshaun Watson trying to be a productive guy. And look, Deshaun Watson, I love him. I love him as a productive quarterback, but they don't have a healthy offensive line. They got injury-prone offensive players, especially with the trade of DeAndre Hopkins. I just don't really see big of an impact. So I think Colts at 11-5, winning the division is right. Tennessee at 9-7. Now they did have Jacksonville at 5-11, but I think they could become 4-12. And I do see Houston potentially being a 13-3, or they could be a 5-11 team. But again, I just don't see this really happening for both those teams on the low ends, but I do see Indianapolis making a jump. Now let's move on to the AFC East. This is the Bills, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Patriots. So I do see the Buffalo Bills finishing up at 10-6 and winning the division. First time ever that the Bills and the Jets get a break after 20 years of just nothing but disappointments, dysfunctions all throughout the AFC East. It's wide open. The Bills restructured the defense and they got better. Josh Allen now has a favorite target in Stephon Diggs, who I think is going to be a huge impact for this organization. Now, we're not sure he's going to be a big splash, but he's going to be a favorite target for Josh Allen, and I think he's going to produce a lot more. They didn't have big-time wide receivers. I mean, they relied on John Brown, who older veteran wide receiver. They needed some new juice. But I think they're definitely going to have a better outcome this next year. And the defense never stopped themselves short. And Sean McDermott, I think, is an underappreciated coach and is very underrated. This is a guy that shaped this team to who they are last year as a wild card team, but I think they're finally going to end up winning the division, and they're going to have some tough competition with them. The New York Jets, I do see finishing up at 8-8 as the second team. Now, they could potentially be 9-7, but this is where I think they got to put the pieces together. I love the fact that they drafted Mekhi Becton to fix the hole for Sam Darnold, so I don't see him running for his life anymore. Sam Darnold's finally going to have some time in the pocket to throw to all of his offensive wide receivers and, of course, give an opening for a guy like Le'Veon Bell to be a secondary screen receiver and a running back to run through the pocket. So they're finally going to have some protection, and they ended up getting Denzel Mims in the wide receiver position that gives Sam Darnold an extra wide receiver and another favorite target. So they're going to produce. They're going to produce some way. And again, this is a break for them. Now, the Miami Dolphins I don't see them being potentially as a rebuilding franchise. They could go 8-8, 9-7, potentially like the New York Jets, maybe push for a playoff team, a playoff spot, because getting Tua, getting some protection, and of course, getting some really, really good players in the defensive side. Like, think about this. The last 5 games the Dolphins have played, they've won 4 out of 5. This is not a team to sleep on. Brian Flores, as a defensive coordinating coach, he's going to shape the defense where they're a strong team and they're going to produce massively on the defensive sides. So I don't see them potentially being a team to sleep on. I think they're going to do well. So the AFC East is wide open. So I see the Buffalo Bills going 10-6, winning the division. The Jets potentially 8-8, 9-7. And same thing with the Dolphins. I have them at 7-9, but I think they could potentially be 9-7 in the coming weeks. And then you got New England. I think they're going to take a step back, but I don't think they're going to be a 13-3 team. I think they might go 5-11. They may end up winning some good breaks, but I'm not sure how Bill Belichick is going to work this all out with Jarrett Stidham in that defense. Okay, so finally, the AFC West, as all of us has waited for. Hopefully now, because again, this is a big time competition in the AFC West. So it's the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders. So The Kansas City Chiefs, I do see winning the division once again, but I do see them going 13-3. They locked in all their players that they had last year. They may have given up maybe one or two, but they went and got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, helped the run game because Damian Williams is a really good running back, but I do see him as a situational running back. I don't see him as an everyday back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire could potentially end up taking that spot as a productive wide receiver, in the screen, and he's also a really good running back that can run through the offensive front lines. But this is a team that, again, Super Bowl defending champions, they're the targets in the NFL. But I think this is going to be difficult because, again, it's really, really hard trying to go 13-3, 14-12, 14-2, especially in a tough division like the AFC West, where everybody's got defenses, everybody's got offenses. The Chargers, I do see taking the jump, and I think they're going to be 11-5. This is my thought with this. The Chargers didn't go 12-4 a previous year from last year, and then go 5-11 last year for nothing. They got a new face in the franchise quarterback, Justin Herbert. They went and got Kenneth Murray as a steal in the draft as a linebacker in the first round. And they went and got some really, really good steals of the draft. Alohi Gilman, KJ Hill, and Josh Kelly. This is a team now that wants to win. And a lot of expectations are saying, how is Anthony Lynn going to handle all that? It's a lot of pressures. But I do think the Chargers are stacked up on defense. They're stacked up on offense. Now, of course, it's going to be the defensive. It's going to be the coaching play style, which we're not used to seeing Anthony Lynn in some of these cases, but I think it's going to be interesting. So I do see the Chargers making a jump. The Broncos, I think, going to be 9-7 because I think this is a team that is a dark horse team to make the playoffs. This is a team under Vic Fangio that they had injuries, but they upgraded defense, getting A.J. Bouye, Jarrell Casey, and then they go and get a couple of really good defensive players, and they go and get Jerry Jeudy out of the draft to help Drew Lock. So Drew Lock's got some offensive players, having Melvin Gordon and Cortland Sutton and Phillip Lindsay. This is an interesting team. I'm not going to sleep on the Broncos here on this one. So I think they're going to be very improved because think about it. Last 5 games, they went 4-5. They figured some things out, and I think they're going to be on a hot streak. But for how long that will be, it's going to be a lot of tough competition. But this is where the Denver needs to overcome all of those scenarios. And finally, the Las Vegas Raiders. I think it's going to be tough breaks. They're still trying to figure this thing out, but I think the Raiders are going to go 5-11. Look, I no disrespect to the Raiders franchise, but the fact that they got some young players who have a lot of learning and a lot of different adjustments, but they could easily go be a 7-9, maybe an 8-8 team, depending on if anything changes. But there is no excuses for Derek Carr to push him to his limits and be the quarterback that he should be. And this is going to be interesting. Quarterback competition. I love the competitions all around, and I think this is going to be interesting to watch. But I do see Kansas City, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders in that AFC West. Now, if you're looking at the playoff standings, you've got Kansas City and Baltimore on their buys. You've also got Indianapolis in the number 3, Buffalo at number 4, Chargers at 5, Tennessee at 6. Now, it could change depending on how Cleveland and the Jets favor out. And then you've got the Broncos as the dark horse team. That's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be interesting. I look at the playoffs. There's no excuses. No excuses. And teams like the Jets, the Dolphins, the Broncos, the Browns, either one of them, and even the Titans. So this could change at any point in time. But I'm excited for it. So thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And of course, hit the bell button for all the notifications of the next shows coming up. We will see you tomorrow here at 10:30 a.m., 12:30 Pacific Eastern time, p.m. Eastern time. My apologies. My mind's just moving everywhere. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Have a great weekend.